good morning to everyone, and welcome to the first panel of the Vukubone Music Conference, which is the role of intellectual property rights in music monetization. Before we start, I'd just like to make mention that this panel is brought to you as part of the Music in Africa live program, supported by the German Federation, the German Federal Foreign Office, Siemens Stiftung and Goethe-Institute, Alliance Française, and Destiny Music. And I would like to introduce our panel. To my right, we have Dr. Dludlu, who is the Registrar of IP at the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Trade. To his right, we have Ms. Velemseni Nzimanze. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Veli. She is one of the brightest stars that we have in our local constellation. She is also a music educator. And to her right, we have Mr. Paul Tarvis, who most of you will know as Dr. P. He is an intellectual property consultant. He is a multimedia producer, and he is CEO of Chelele. And to his right, we have Mr. Mmeli Sonqumalo, who is a filmmaker by trade, but today he is wearing the hat of chairperson of the Copyright Society Board. Welcome to our distinguished panelists. So the format of the panel, we'll start off with just some brief presentations just to establish a common ground for us all as we discuss this matter. And we will have a conversation with the panel for about an hour, and we will open it up to the floor as well for questions. So may you please make note of any questions that you may have as we proceed, because this is very much about you more than it is about us here. Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Dludlu, may you please start us off.
Thank you, Mr. Hlanze. Good morning, everyone. I have been introduced. I am Dludlu, Registrar of Intellectual Property. Intellectual Property Office is an umbrella office that encompasses copyright protection, trademark protection, patents, and all other intellectual property that is available in the kingdom. My task today, this morning, is to talk about the role of IP rights in music monetization. I'll make a brief presentation. It's just 3 slides, actually. I think the task that I have is to kind of establish what is intellectual property, so that whatever we talk about later, when the experts give you strategies of how to grow your business, we are firm in the foundations of what IP is, particularly what IP in the nation is. Because you have to understand that IP is territorial. Yes, you may have rights in other countries, but the gist of it is, most of it is territorial. You have to understand it in its local context. So, what is IP? IP is a collection of rights for intangible creative work. Now, if you take that as our first principle, as a musician, as an entrepreneur in the music space, you have to understand the gravity of that right. You have to look at IP as an asset. It's an intangible asset. It's property right. It's recognized in our constitution as a property. So you must work from that principle that what once you've created something, once you've created intellectual property, it is a property. You take it as an asset. It helps in the business of music to look at IP as an asset, a recognized asset. Yes, it is intangible, but you have to take it as an asset, because you'll start appreciating that an asset, essentially the value of the asset, depends on what you do with it. It can appreciate, it can depreciate. For instance, if you have a brand and you have a scandal, that brand may depreciate. But if you are you're a goodwill ambassador like Mmeli here, that asset will appreciate. So one of the first principles is that you have to you have it circled in your mind that IP is an asset, an intangible asset, and it can be. I think there is a growing body of acceptance that it can be part of your balance sheet. It is a serious economic benefit. IP is a serious economic benefit. So, and then the other point that I want to make is that there are different types of IP. Like I said, from the IP office, there we have different offices underneath. We have copyright, which is what we're going to talk about mostly today here. But I want to just go better, as an artist, someone who is involved in the music business. Do not only look at copyright when you're looking at IP. There are the other rights, like for instance, trademarks and designs. Trademark, we will not talk about that much today, but trademark is essentially an identifier of the origin of the goods or services. So if you have, if you're a band and you don't have a trademark, a registered trademark for that matter, there is, that's a missed opportunity. For instance, Vukubone, that qualifies as a trademark. They haven't visited the trademark office though to register that as a brand, as a trademark. It's a registered trademark. It's something that so IP, you mustn't just look at copyright, you must look at the other things like the example we've just made, where you use trademarks to add value to your business, to your music business, so, and also designs. Designs helps in how you package the product that you're selling, which is music. We're talking earlier with Dr. P here, and the disappearance of your CDs and whatnot, the traditional media of mode of presenting your product out there. It's now in the digital space. Even there, trademarks are still important. Designs are still important. Presentation of your content is important. It adds value, and yeah. And then the other thing we've done with that, I think that was a long way of saying, you do not only look at copyright, you look at the other IP rights. And then what exactly is copyright? That's the one we're talking about today. Copyright is a bundle of rights that gives a creator of original content. It gives you control over the production, the reproduction, the distribution, the public display or public performance of your work, adaptation of your work, of your creative work, or modification of that. So you have these many different rights under copyright, and they are distinct. If you, for instance, we'll get to that a bit later, if you assign your rights to someone or you have a license, you license your copyright to someone, you can, if you decide, only assign one specific aspect. For instance, you give it to an agent just for distribution. You use the other rights for something else, or you use them for yourself, or you assign a different agent for that, according to their strengths or whatever your business model is. So you have to look at copyright as a bundle of rights. In the Copyright Act, in the Copyright and Related Rights Act of 2018, it's a Copyright Act and also related rights. The related rights, in some countries we say neighboring rights. That was added because you're not only getting your traditional copyright, but then there are also the other related rights. For instance, the right to publication or broadcast, which is not copyright per se, but it's a related right to that. So copyright, it gives you a series of rights. I think in our Act we have about 7 or 9 of the different types of control that you have over your work. Chairperson of the Copyright Society will give us more detail on that one. As I said, okay, maybe what's important to also highlight is that we said original content, creator of original content. In the music space, we usually use the word, let's create something new, let's create something fresh. That is quite different to what copyright is. We can have 2 independent creators, inspired, for instance, from the proceedings in this conference, and they create something which will be the same. It will look the same. But when you say original content, it means you didn't copy. So you can come up with something but it's still both qualifies as for both people rather. It still qualifies as original content, and that's where the dispute usually is in this industry, where it's like that one, it sounds similar to my previous song or whatnot. So you have to understand that the originality there in copyright, it's different to newness. I think those are the terms that those are legal terms. And then I think maybe 1 or 2 more things just to highlight. It's that copyright, in copyright, fair use is permitted. For instance, artists, we say fair use is permitted. Yes, you have right, you have control over how your product is marketed, how it's disseminated to the public. But then in other instances, fair use can intervene. For instance, which is journalists reporting on what's happening here. The organizers of this conference have control of the setup and whatnot here. But our journalists can sample for reporting. So those are permitted use. A content creator. For instance, you can create something that becomes that's trending. Of course, memes, and they will be using your copyright content. But that's allowed. So those are the things like fanele. Copyright is a balance of rights. You have control over your work, but then there are those limitations. So fair use is one of the limitations that we have. It's in our Act. Of course, there are the other limitations and exceptions. For educational purposes, people can use your copyright content and research. There are many other exceptions that are found in our law. And then the last part on this slide, we can say copyright can be registered. The reason I say can be, copyright, it's a right that arises automatically. You have to know that. If someone is sitting at a bar, a song, the Angels of Creativity, and then they write their song on a piece of paper, they have copyright there. But then it helps, for everyone's sake, to register it. There are two types of registrations that are possible. You can register with the society. That's where you are saying, I am exploring, I'm commercializing my right. But then you can also, let's say, you like, this song, it'll try in 3 years' time. The Copyright Office provides that voluntary registration. Essentially, there it's like you're using the Copyright Office as a timestamp to say, on this day, on this date, I created this original content. So the Copyright Office there can be used for those purposes. But then if you are now exploring, you have to do the compulsory registration, which would be with the Copyright and Neighboring Rights Society. Yes. All right. And then we move on to the next slide. Essentially, the exploitation of copyright. I think, that's the term that our Act uses, exploitation. That is actually monetization. Copyright gives you three types of rights. You have the economic rights, there are moral rights, and then there are the related rights, as I've said. So under economic rights, for instance, that's where you have the right of assignment. You are commercializing your copyright. So under economic rights, you have assignments and licensing. I think we'll just, in the next slide, we'll just go into a bit more detail on that one. And of course, the chairperson will expand on that. And then we have moral rights. Essentially, moral rights, it's, before that, we would say licensing. Licensing can be exclusive or non-exclusive. I think it goes to what I was saying earlier, that, you can give me certain rights and retain lamanye. But if it's an exclusive right, it's like you are only licensing it to one person, and let me leave that for the chairperson. And then the moral rights. And moral rights, they usually arise, for instance, when someone is under the employ of someone, or you funder. Essentially, I give you money to write a song for me. You will assign the copyright to me. But Copyright Act here to prevent exploitation of people without pay, it has made it, it's an international standard, it has made it mandatory that the moral right, essentially the right, you would say, to be named as the creator of the work, even after selling of that, you still have this inseparable right of being named as the author of the work. It also means, under moral rights, we have the right not to be named if you want to use a pseudonym, and there are many reasons why people wouldn't want to be associated with their work. But the moral right is the right. I would say whoever creates the work will remain, will have to be named. They have authority as to whether they are named or not named under that copyright that exists from their work. And then the related rights, the rights in performance and broadcast and recording. I suppose in this section we will not go into those ones. All right, and then this is my last slide. The IP monetization, what are the strategies? Yes, here I'm wearing the registrar's hat, but I'm what you call the IP strategies. That how do, copy IP, you shouldn't look at IP as an end to itself. IP is a means, it's a catalyst to your economic empowerment. So what do you do with IP? There are essentially 4 things that you can do in IP. 1, you can sell it. It's the assignment that we talked about, the Section 35. There, it's people, as I said earlier, who, for instance, you can sell your IP rights completely through assignment. Assignment, what's important is that you have to know is that it has to be in writing. And it helps if you then register it with the Copyright Office or with the Copyright Society. And then another strategy, number 2, is to rent out, essentially. That's the term that we can use, which is to license. Well, like I've said, it can be an exclusive license or non-exclusive. And it's a very detailed document as to how those rights are to be treated. My advice would be that should be handled by, a professional. Licensing is very deep. You see, my colleagues are nodding here. There are complexities in that. What you can see as simple, it can become a nightmare if it's not properly done. Licensing must be handled by professionals. And then the other thing is merchandise, your rights. I think it goes back to what I said earlier, that IP is an umbrella of rights, of rights for intangible work. To merchandise, so yes, you have this song, but then it's an event. What other IP around that product can you use to monetize, to assist you in your marketing campaign? Because as we know, sometimes, technical or quality products, copyright products, they find that they do not sell as much. Not because of quality, but just because of marketing. So the merchandising, that's where it comes in, that you have to put your work, merchandise, have merchandise strategies around your copyright. And then the last one, of course, is that you can sue. It's a way of making money. If people are using your work, there are damages that are to be paid there. And I think the footnote that we can have there is that you have to, part of the importance of registration, which my colleagues will emphasize, is that with registration, if we speak of damages, damages are easier to calculate when we know when your right was registered. In some jurisdictions, you cannot sue if your work is not registered. So remember, the outlook we have is that yes, we are building ours here locally, but of course the reach of our product, it mustn't just be local. It has to be, outward looking. So in the other jurisdictions, the registration has to be there, and then if there is infringement, you have to sue. It starts with, did you register, or did you document the existence of your copyright?
Mr. Nxumalo, may you please take over your presentation, and then after that we shall begin the two-way conversation. Just to reset the room, we decided to start with presentations just to almost set a common ground for everyone, that as we discuss this, we're almost all on the same wavelength, just to ensure that we're all together. Mr. Nxumalo, you can take it away.
Thank you, Mmeli. I think Lagami presentation will focus more on, let me just say, unpacking the society part of things, because the Copyright Society has just been introduced into this ecosystem. It's something that's new, and sometimes there are a number of the other misunderstandings in terms of, or lack of understanding in terms of what it is, but also in other cases is about understanding, okay, there's a so establish some society. What's it going to do for me? What's in it for me? Should I even care or should I not? Is it going to make my life any better or not? So I'm just going to try to keep this presentation there. Obviously, there were some things there that Dr. Lulu had touched on in terms of understanding the rights that the Act confers. What are these rights? But also just I'm hoping some of these things will then will also be able to have an opportunity to unpack them as the discussion goes along. But ngibe establish the sort of like the context of the society and the board fundamentally. So let me just start with, okay, so there's, as Dr. Lulu has introduced, there's an act that within the act, there was a provision that establishes a copyright society. Good in Swaziland, there shall now be a copyright society of Eswatini. Now, what is this? Okay, I mean, I'm the chairperson of the Copyright Society Board. But because between the board and then the society, the secretariat of the society as well, which is the element that is a bit more operational. But fundamentally, Copyright Society simply, what this society is simply the introduction of a CMO into the Eswatini ecosystem. If you're an artist or a musician, fundamentally, the number of ways you can generate income from your music. Almost like the primary way that often happens is through performance. You're getting booked for gigs. Basically, that's probably how quite a lot of musicians are making their money. Am I getting booked? And that's how the bread is coming in through my bookings. But what Lomtse for copyright was almost establishing was opening up another avenue of generating revenue. I mean, so Balile, Dr. Lulu, some ways, but through monetization of copyright yako. Like Dr. Lulu says, okay, let's say maybe even within the music space, you'll find a number of copyrights, because there's copyright in the musical work. That is what it's called, copyright in the musical work. Logo is the music. Like a producer creates a beat, that beat, without lyrics, without performance or anything, just the musical composition itself. Whoever is responsible for creating that musical composition owns that copyright. In the act, there's always this reference to the author. The author is always the owner of a copyright. And then the question is like, who is an author? The author is the person who has utilized umcabango wakhe, invested time and energy, and using the innovation or the creativity within their minds, they've been able to create a music fixed on a music sheet. The progression or the structure from A to Z, these are the creative choices I'm making here. Beat going up, music going down. I'm not a musician, I'm a filmmaker, as you know. So, if I'm not speaking the right language, maybe failing out. But I mean, you know, musically, the structure of a song from A to Z, if you're able to break it down, the person who's responsible for formulating my choices is the author of that musical work. And one of the things that was important, I think, for you to be able to own, to be recognized as the owner of lo msebenzi wakho, your work has to be fixed. It's a legal term. That means your work must have been reduced to tangible form. Tangible form is your work must be recorded in some sort of way, lengakhona ukuthi either reproduce or inikwe to somebody else kubonakala ukuthi lenvo yakho iyahamba from one person to another. An idea cannot be copyright protected. You can't just hum your melody. We hum, oh, that's a nice melody. But now I record, and I'm not talking about recording it purely in terms of on your computer, it's now a song, although that's a form of fixing it, recording it in that way. Even if you can just recording a cell phone yako, at least once it exists as a recording of some kind, it's fixed, then it can be protected. But when you have not done that, you cannot claim ownership of that copyright. Singahlala la sobang tu na Dr. P uhame wena your melody, but meaning I record a melody, I fix up hansi, I will be the author or the owner of that copyright, not you who was humming it. So it's always important to go see fix your compositions or your work. Fixing it means recording it in material form, but even in loose, informal ways, do that, please. So, almost maybe the types of copyrights that may exist within the music space. Copyright ownership in the music in the music work, which is like the music creation without the words and everything. There can be copyright ownership, literary ownership. Literary meaning the words that accompany a song. Whoever writes la magama owns that copyright. It's a literary copyright. And then the copyright dimension, the sound recording. The sound recording is when loyo umsebenzi loyo that musical umsebenzi music and the lyrics is being recorded in studio or whatever platform has been created. It's going to be recorded and exist as a record that can be traded. And the question is, who owns that copyright? The owner of that copyright is the person, which can often be, most cases can be the producer or can be the record label. It's the person under whose direction and insistence the recording takes place.
And just to add to that, the sound recording you're speaking of, I think it's known more to artists as the master.
Yes,
right?
yes,
so
absolutely.
This is the master. When you're talking about the master or the master rights or who owns the master,
absolutely,
that is what he's referring to.
Absolutely, absolutely. So even there, whoever is in charge of directing or under whose insistence that recording takes place, that person becomes the owner of that copyright. So it may not necessarily be the person who's created the beat. It may not necessarily be the person who has created the lyrics. So I was just opening up allow those three levels of copyright, and you can protect these things. When the beat, you can protect the beat. The lyrics, you can protect the lyrics, but also the person who's been responsible for ensuring the sound recording exists, they can protect that as well. There's also something called neighboring rights, but I might segue into that a little bit later because I just want to get through things within a short space of time. Now, with lama rights, what does it mean when it says you are the author or you're the copyright owner? If you fixed your work, copyright ownership is immediately activated. Even if ungakahambi wayeregister le product leyo wathola le certificate, it's recommended obviously, it's always advised, if you've recorded the thing, you've got it in material form, it's fixed. Hamba, we are at the Copyright Office and register it so that it will be certificate, its meaning owner of this particular work. But ushunga logo. Once you've fixed it in material form, you are automatically the owner. What does that ownership mean, or what does it give you? What's the value of copyright ownership? Fundamentally, copyright ownership will simply be when, as the author, you are the authorizing body. There are certain things that cannot be done without your consent. Our list, Act, it's about those 7 things. The right to reproduce and sell and publish lo msebenzi wakho, meaning ukuthi people making copies of your work and then maybe selling those copies in the marketplace. No one can do that without your authorization. Anyone who does that, angeke kuthola i-consent, imvumo yakho nibe nezivumelwano lesithe ukuthi nanguniketa le mvumo utanginiketa malini. Anyone who does that is infringing on your copyright, and that person can be sued. That is when legal action can be taken against that person to remedy kokuthi wena solahlekelwe ngumnotho lotsite. So lama rights lo nawo, lama authorization kokuthi tinvo lokumele tiqelwe kuwe kuze kokuthi it basically is like pay for use. People or people in society, others who are not owners, people cannot use your lo msebenzi wakho in different ways without your consent. They cannot reproduce it and sell it. They cannot broadcast it. They cannot adapt it into any other material form. They cannot import it and export it into Swaziland. They cannot have it. They cannot communicate it to the public, which is they cannot perform it in public without your authorization. Those are the rights. It gives you about 7 rights. I think I've listed 5 or 6 of those rights. But obviously, some of these things, it's encouraged we all sort of like familiarize ourselves with the act, because that's where you're going to get all of this sort of like details. But as the author, all those rights are vested in you. Bantu kumele bete kuwe batocela imvumo to use your work in any of those ways. So, njoba akhulumile dokotela ukuthi when they come to you to ask for your permission, you can ngilapho bese sokungena khona lama licensing agreements, labo assignments, and how you are transferring whether you are transferring my rights onke or you are not transferring onke. That's often also almost like the crux, or at least the beginning of the crux of the business side, knowing how to make the right decisions at that level. Because when people are coming to you seeking authorization, what kind of authorization are you providing them? Because it's a lies. Are you giving them onke my rights and then I give you my copyright, you can use it in perpetuity, you've got the right to do everything that you want to do with the, you know what I mean? That's how artists sometimes get disenfranchised. Imadlana wena maybe bosenhluphekwe ngaleso sikhathi nakwendeka lokho you needed to pay bills or whatever the situation could have been, uthathe and you just give away almost like umnotho, because I think that's the importance of lama IP rights, is that njengoba udokotela bakhuluma, it's an asset ngumnotho, this particular thing. And one of the beauties about it is ukuthi ngumnotho longakhona kusebenzisa over your lifetime if you are licensing it properly. You know, by licensing it properly, it's almost like umuntu, for example, when you're giving somebody authorization to do something, whether it's to adapt or to broadcast or to whatever, you put certain types of limitations on it. Kungabi nje in perpetuating as it you can put limitations in terms of time. For such a period, after this period, you can no longer do this thing. You give a person limitations in terms of territory. You can exploit the rights lena in this territory, particularly many territories in that exploit mina on those 70s or someone else could exploit. You can also, these are bundles of rights. The right to sell, the right to broadcast, the right to adapt, the right to import and export. You can give somebody a license to do just one thing. Because okay, when right, you can broadcast for this for this period. But loga kusho ukuthi lo mfundi loyo sotokhona ukuthi nasebafuna nasengiqhamuka mina soma film ngithi I want to create an adaptation of based on the lyrics ale ngoma yakho. I want to create a short film or whatever based on that. You can still hold on to those rights. You can select, be selective. I'm giving this right, I'm holding on to this right, I'm giving this right, I'm limiting times of periods. That allows this thing imali over a sustained period of time, just by making those sort of like those particular choices. And that is where the idea of a CMO comes in. I mean, but I hope maybe start kulmis as we go on. But that is where the concept of a CMO or copyright society sort of like enters the fray. Because we're talking about an ecosystem whereby as an artist you have this asset, and you've got these rights that are vested in you, and you can commercialize or derive economic benefit from this particular thing. So what CMOs, the role of a CMOs enter the ecosystem to pretty much, it's almost like they're offering that service to authors or to copyright owners. The service being Gwaguti, as a CMO, as a body, we are structured and capacitated in a way Gwaguti, we author. You can approach a CNO, or we can commercialize or extract an economic benefit on your behalf for Loam Sebendile. Because if you look at the ecosystem, you've got content creators, which is your beat makers, writers, sound record labels, basically copyright owners. You've got content creators, copyright owners. On the other side of the spectrum, you've got users, and my users are sugar, and you've got broadcasters, that's how they, that's their business. So they need access to the tema authors. You've got TV on the other side of things. They need maybe they need some music for their documentaries. They need music for their jingles, and so you've got filmmakers. Like myself, I'm making a film. I need music for a score in my film. You've got advertising agencies. They're selling products. They need music for my ads out. You've got retailers, Titolo, Pick and Pay, ShopRite, Clicks, you name it. They're selling products and they have that nice ambience. Music in the background. Research actually shows that music in the background can actually enhance kuthenga kwebantu. You've got festivals or entertainment night spots, mabara. People have to playing music to sell beer and get people. I want to stay in this environment. The music and more beer and whatnot. You've got all these potential users. Because to me, it's very interesting how I was just thinking that music is almost like, electricity and water, because almost every building or space, we've got electricity, it's demand, and you're paying every monthly for lama bills now. And almost every space, not every, but just in general, music is almost there in the background in almost a lot of spaces, restaurants, night sports, airports, now hamba, restaurants, kumbini, kuna music. Just its presence is always there in the background. It's being used. You know what I mean? So you've got content creators ngala, you've got users ngala, la ufuna golo music for the different reasons, not just broadcasters that want the music. And the question becomes, access. Users on the other side, they want convenience. I mean, honestly, are you saying ukuthi kumele ngipheke ngiyofuna zibani ezibani lo senhlangano yathi ngicakisendisa le ngoma yakho vele akekho vele msena ukuphi it can sometimes be frustrating for users to have to go and seek out every artist individual by individual if they want to their music. One of the things CMOs offer to users is convenience. If you've got all the different authors, the different types of authors in their music, they register their works with the CMO and they authorize the CMO ukuthi ngicela ungicommercializele or ungexploitele lo music wami. Users will come to you to license my music. They will use the music. When we CMO, we are going to monitor that use, and then you're going to make sure they're paying the rights royalty for that use, and then you distribute the royalty back to the artist. That is what CMO is here to do as a collection society. It's this institution in between authors and users that is at its core, it's selling convenience for everybody. It's convenience for authors. Your stuff is in this body that has access to all these users. And na stuff sakos lapo inside that library, it makes it easy for users to access your material to know there's this song here and I can exploit it. But further to that, sometimes, this business of commercializing your copyright, generating income from royalties, it can be capital intensive. In fact, it is capital intensive. Imagine this scenario. Okay, you've got your song. When nje unguwe usithatha lesikhathi to be able to monitor ukuthi emsakatweni bayidlale kangaki le ngoma nini kanjani on streaming platforms by stream kangaki. It can be cumbersome. You're a creative. Sometimes you should be in studio, probably making your next work of your next hit. But instead, that's inconvenience. You know what I mean? CMOs offer that. That's their job. That's what they wake up and do every day. They invest in the technologies, because even the technology of tracking play can be very, very expensive for an individual. Yet the CMO with its business structure and its fundraising techniques, however it has raised its funds, is able to invest in the technologies that allow them to track how many times, and be able to compute the royalty that is due to you. So fundamentally, CMOs are that. As a body, the CMO is here to offer that kind of service to authors. It's about being able to set rates. What are the rates that are going to be set in terms of if somebody comes to license this particular the music, what's the rate? So setting rates, setting my licensing standards, putting in place the monitoring mechanisms to track, play, collecting that type of data, computing the royalty that's due, distributing royalties to authors. That's the essence of what this body is. Me sitting in this position, I'm obviously the chairperson of this board, but I also want to make that clarification. A society, just like a corporation, it's a non-profit organization. By the way, it's in the act. It's a non-profit organization, but from a corporate governance point of view, there's the board, and then there's an operational. There's an executive, an operational unit, which is called the secretariat. lelengumlomshina, lelenda lomsebendi. As a board, we meet 4 to 8 times a year. We look at lomsebendi wale executive, what is the executive delivering the value to the authors. Nangabe kunema issues, that is where we come in to sort of give strategic direction or set targets or look at ways what needs to be done to improve performance. So kahle an oversight body. Labantu labenda lomsebenzi is the secretariat. But one of our key functions, which is one of the most important functions that we have to do as a board, is to hire the secretariat, to hire the right people that are going to be able to serve my interests and my authors in the most economic or generates the most economic value for that. So the society, like Kona Nyalo, it was launched about 5 months ago. There was a 3-month period where Tina as a board were being inducted, meaning we're being familiarized in terms of lomsebendi. And then these past 2 months, that's when we've begun to implement the plan of action. And the plan of action in 3 main phases. The first phase is hiring and training of the secretariats, the people that are going to run the society. The second phase is the preparation of this environment. What do I mean by preparation of the environment? Preparation of the environment simply means goguti yebo kona society say khona, but we cannot just simply go zithe imsakato salu lethe ma royalties ethu. The environment as it is yalakangwane does not have the systems that need to be in place for copyright collection or for royalty collection to take place. Kumele kube nema systems for setting rates. Kuthi i-rate lakangwane isethwa kanjani. A clear structured system so that the users, broadcasters bantu basemsakatweni or advertisers or whoever, people know ukuthi how much should I be paying for this particular access of the particular license. There have to be mechanisms ukuthi how is this tracking mechanisms, monitoring mechanisms. So preparing the environment implies putting in place those systems. Tracking systems, licensing, all those systems. That needs to happen, and it's not an overnight thing, unfortunately. These kinds of platforms, Vukubone and others, these are the kind of platforms that we'll have more of, because preparing the environment is outside of putting up the systems, with the users themselves. They need to be sensitized. Authors need to be sensitized. That is going to be a year-long program whereby the systems are being put in place and everybody is being sensitized. It's only when those systems are in place, only then can the royalty collection operation begin. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Ngumalo. That was a mouthful. It's a lot. It's a lot, and I'll be honest, we're just touching the tip of the iceberg here. It really goes way deeper, but maybe to bring in Dr. P here, we're speaking of opportunities to monetize, we're speaking of licensing, we're speaking of all these things, and as someone who's a multimedia producer and someone who I believe has had an opportunity to experience what it means to license or to give your work for usage, can you maybe speak to your experience? Could be both in a local context and what you have experienced even outside of the country, and as well just speak to the different opportunities that not only you've experienced, but that you can see that, you know, as a local industry, these are the things that we can, you know, get out of the protection of our IP.
All right, thank you, Mmeli. I think echoing on what Dr. Dludlu said and what Usamge said, all that information that you guys heard there, I know it's a lot, sounds confusing, there's a lot of information to take in. I think the main nugget from all of that is that you need to expose yourself to all the education that is required in order to be in this business. It's almost like any other business. If you don't know the ins and outs of trading, where to sell your things, the laws, the regulations, it's almost like anything. In food, if you're going to make a product and you want to sell it at Pick and Pay, there's development, there's taking into standards people, there's testing, there's all sorts of things that you have to be well versed in order for you to know how to exploit your product. There is no difference when it comes to multimedia and music. So these rights and all of these things that have been unpacked here in front of you, just in brief, is to give you the idea of how much information you actually need to acquire yourself. This is not something we can, it's not, nothing here is a secret. Nothing here is hidden knowledge. All of the stuff is out there, it's readily available. You just need to dedicate the hours constantly, at least 2-3 hours a day to reading, for you to grasp all of this. Because there's a word that keeps being thrown around, author and ownership of copyright. In order for you to be an author or you to have authority over something, you need to have the understanding of every aspect of it. For you to be an authoritative figure, principal of a school or anything, you need to know what happens in grade 1, 2, what they're teaching, the cleaners doing, what's happening on the field, all of that, for you to be the authority. So if you want to exploit your property, you have to be the authority. So for you to have the authority, it needs this, it needs knowledge. You need to know every aspect. What are they talking about when they're talking about who's the author this side, who's the composer, who's a performer? Oh, it's being exploited this here and there. I think that's where I just want to leave it with you guys, is to say, guys, this thing is education intensive. You got to keep reading, go to SAMRO, go to CSAC's pages, IFPI. There are all of these people out there that are giving you these things, because these industries have been set up by practitioners. It's not set up by government. It's set up by people who want this thing to be fair for us. You understand? So they've understood the nitty-gritties, but they've seen how complicated it gets. Okay. So talking about IP and the opportunities, monetization. Where music is played and money is made, somebody needs to get paid. I think that's the way you kind of need to understand it in a simpler term. Because everywhere, those places, if what you have contributed and what you have created is helping them earn some sort of revenue or money, then you should be entitled to it. The question is, you need to know how to be entitled to it. All right, it's not just going to be automatic, it's not just going to be given to you, and I'm telling you this thing is not fair. Okay, because there are people out there that are making tons of money off of your IP because you didn't know better. They know better how to exploit it, where to put it, how to charge, how to do those things. So that's why I was saying you need to know. Okay, so let's look at IP. IP, like they were saying, it's your idea that you have now turned into something physical. Because you can't trade your idea. You can't just go and say, hey guys, I've got this good idea, pay me all this money. My song is the dopest thing ever. Listen to it, it's better than Drake's and everyone. What is the value in it? You understand? And that's where the monetization and copyright comes in. Is to say, I've taken my idea, here it is. We've packaged it, we've put it in a way. How do we then exploit it and take it to the different places? So now, obviously the first one we always speak about is radio and TV. Those are the big giant behemoths that everybody looks to as a means to make money off of your IP. Unfortunately, the amount of money that's going into TV and radio is dwindling by the day. You understand? Because of digital and all other aspects that are going on. So now, where else do you take your music and those type of things, like Mmeli was asking? So I think the best way to do it is maybe I'll give you the personal experience instead of trying to make it like this. Okay. When I came into the industry, wanted to make music, those type of things. I was overseas at school, and when I was overseas at school, we made a couple of tracks with some friends, and we heard of something called Midem. Now, Midem is like a huge conference that happens in France. And what they do is it's like multimedia, but it's not necessarily just music focused. You're looking at other aspects, you understand. So someone told us about Medem to tell us that, look guys, you're making good music. This stuff would be great for soundtracks. This would be great for things like video games and things like that. So we'd ask ourselves what they actually, they take money for that. That's where we came across the whole copyright aspect of it, because you need to know where you want to place your stuff. So if it's going to, for example, music or TV, you need to know how they are going to make money and how much of your product brings value to that bottom line for you then to reap some sort of benefit. Do you get what I'm saying? So maybe if your song was on that soundtrack and that made the soundtrack, it has more value, right? But if they could just remove your song from the soundtrack and that movie still sells, you've got no value. You need to work on other aspects of bringing it up, right? So you need to understand how are these people making money from your works, right? So you have TV, radio, which is the traditional way of taking it there, hoping it gets spins, right? But then you have, like they said, film, TV, advertising, all of those things. That is where you then know where your copyright is being exploited and how. Those are the avenues that you can make money off of. You can also, like Dr. Lulu was talking about, it's a bigger ecosystem now. Your image, your logo, could be far more successful than your tracks. Your t-shirts could outsell your music. So those are other aspects where you now need to be on top of it because it's a whole product, like you were saying. You're not just using the music can be part of a bigger thing. So now we have gone into a space where we're not getting much money from TV and radio, but you are now using your music as a vehicle or a catalyst to the other opportunities that are related to your music. So be it fashion, merchandising is one of the biggest things that a lot of artists are going into. You guys have noticed it. All of a sudden people are big on logos. Why do you think they're big on logos? It's because there could be a PEP in South Africa that comes and says, I want to make 200,000 lunch boxes with your logo. You've seen it at Jet. Biggie's pictures on the front of some t-shirts on those things. You've seen artists that different things are coming out. That is licensing. What Dr. Dlamini was talking about, that is licensing. Someone somewhere says, we want to make juice bottles with your logo because you're the biggest artist is popping. We know the kids are going to buy the stuff. That is licensing. That is another avenue and revenue that your IP makes for you. All right? You've got things like video games. You've got things like apps. You have all sorts of other avenues now where it becomes part of the experience. If your music is not there, will it affect the product? You see, Usamge was saying it's almost everywhere, right? So that is where you need to now start first understanding your rights and where you can place your things, what people can do with it, because that is part of the monetization. Why I want you guys to really understand your rights is because that actually gives you a strategic roadmap as to where you can place your IP to get money. You understand? Because now you understand how people can exploit it. And once you understand how people can exploit it, then you know who to approach to help you exploit it, right? You have collective management societies like the CMOs. Yes, they're a good place for everybody to go and pay royalties and all those type of things. But if you know what your rights are, you know you can approach a distributor. You can approach a marketing firm. You can approach people that can plug your music. You can do all of these type of things because you know the rights of where it is to go. So I think I don't really want to harp on too much on it because it's a lot to digest. All I want you guys to leave here with is that you have to equip yourself with the understanding and trust. It's a lot. And you can't get it from someone. Someone can't sit you down and explain this thing. You need to get this information and retain it yourself, because then you will have the authority over your product and where it goes. You understand? Robertson Spices knows from the factory, who's packaging it, which trucks are distributing it, what supermarkets it's going into, the prices that they're putting it, write down every single aspect of the business. The guy at the top knows because he has to give authority over how it's used. So if you guys have the knowledge, then you know how to exploit it, you know what rights you have, you know what rights you don't have, and also what opportunities then you can then take it out to. Because if both Pick and Pay are making money off of music being played in the background, they have to go to the CMO and tell them that, look, so many people cross through our doors, the music that's being played brings advantage to our experience. If we didn't have it, people wouldn't buy in our shops. Therefore, we know that X amount needs to go so that this can continue to happen, so that the artist can earn, so that we keep having that experience. All right? So guys, knowledge is power. It's not a cliche. It's not a joke. Because where you trust, where music is played and money is made, somebody's getting paid.
That's a quote. That's yours. That's copyright. So, Dr. Lulu, can you help Dr. P register that? Thank you very much. At this point, because this is such a dense conversation, I don't want to limit it to just us speaking. I think I have a lot of questions, but I'd like to welcome any questions at this point from the audience so that we make sure what is hambanan.
Igama lami ngibhekwa kahleko. Ngindela okuningi nje athi other things as well. So ngicela kubude lapha ukuthi angiyifuni lenzaba bese into njena ifana ukuthi uthenge uphiwe ngumlumbu wakho libhova ulibekele kumanzana kanti tabethe lokudla kokulondla. Noma bangazo babate kanjani ukuthi yalumana kepha naselifike la khona sekude lokudla ukuthi uliphe ligcine selifana etinye tinja kwa lokushini. So lo mthetho siyabonga lokho ufikile Nkosi yami bese usudzinga vele ukuthi ube khona. But inkinga lesengibuta yona ukuthi uhulumende yabelungisile ngokuthi lapha enkantolo phela ngoba nasona lenkinga kuyawudzinga ukuthi bese kuba nalommeli. So ikhona indlela ukuthi ube nemmeli wahulumende la ngala. Nase utholakala ukuthi utafuna ungena enkantolo uthoyele indlela ukuthi usitakale ngoba indleko lekhathi kude kanzi wena mhlambe le infringement yema rights entekile la ngakuwe ku useless lokuthi unawo lo mthetho uyawadi but now ufika lapha abameli bakuvulisa libhuku 3000 uthe 3000 wena so utawukhanzala ukuthi bonke labantu labathi lo mthetho labanaletinto abasitakali ngoba bona bakhe nebethe imali labameli kulelinye ilanga nje ngengaya lapha ku legal advisor wasekhomesini uke wayana ukuthi usube kushopha lapha kamanzini but nangu singimbuta ukuthi hey kwente kanjani la kulo mthetho uyakhulwa nayo uthi ingosi yami namba ngithi lo mthetho nami ngisengawadi kahle so angathi lokuthi sewuhambe kanganani senikhonileni ukuthi naye nimtrain afike ezingeni lokuthi nasifikile le officeini akhole lokuthi asiside phela singaze nje sigcine sesicasha nebameli badle le mali register emva kwaloko bagcina bakutshiya ukuthi ade yakho bahamba ayiye enkantolo.
Well, there are different aspects to Mr. Nhleko. There are different aspects to a question yakho. One, the Copyright Act iyazama lokwenta tintfo tibe lula. There is a procedure, we didn't go into it. In terms of registration, could say who is entitled to those rights. It gives, I think, a registering officer who is supposed to adjudicate issues. That's just copyright. Now, ufuna register legal society. Utawushipha loyo ku a private lawyer. And then also on a broader scale, what we have tried to do, Silhof, is it's a policy change essentially, whereby my rights, IP onke. See, we are now looking at it from a perspective, let's say, we should have a dispute resolution mechanism within the office. For many cases that you would find that ordinarily they would have gone to court. See, IP office, whether it's trademarks or even copyright, that's what we'll do, where we are able to give you a kind of a definitive opinion as to if this matter was to go to court, these are the results that you will get. I am very particular in that regard, so that the decisions that we make at the IP office are the decisions that will be endorsed at Antidote. We are essentially setting up a system whereby if you register a trademark and then by dispute labanye, the decisions, we have concurrence and whatnot, so that it's not just one person making a decision of the certificate. We want anyone loan a certificate is register IP yake, IP office. Kubel kuni kuti ingafika inkantolo ithi no, that decision was wrong by the IP office. That's the standard we are aspiring to go to. And so part of that dispute resolution, the IP office has an open door policy whereby people come in. There are cases where we've given the advice on our opinion as to what is the standing between the parties that are involved. And you find that now with that opinion that we've given, people were able to settle their cases. Sometimes it's a case of David and Goliath, where why am I quoting the Bible? It's the case of the small guy and the big guy, whereby essentially those small entrepreneurs, in terms of financial muscle, they have a case, but they would not have been able to pay the mali yokuvula alfayela enkantolo. But our intervention, yasita lokuthi abone the big guy, if this case goes to court, we actually will lose more than just the case. Even our reputation may be lost. So we are starting to see a trend like shinja lo. You have cases kube ngilendzaba yelibhova leligcina lifana nato tonke tinja. Thanks.
Yes, can I just add something to that? Okay, no, it's not really adding, but it's also just to raise a certain awareness around that. Sort of like explained or unveiled, there's a pathway for the small player for David versus Goliath. But I think also as copyright holders or owners, it's important to know at the end of the day, if you have a copyright owner, it's not like kuna hulmende somewhere, some lo talk to and nangabe there's infringement, basically somebody else lo talk luela. If you are the copyright owner, you are responsible for pursuing your own remedy. You have the freedom. Nelpova lakho ukuthi wena nangabe umuntu vanyathele copyright yami sengimix enkantolo. Obviously, if you win the case, you'll earn whatever you earn, but you have to have the means to pursue that. It's not, the Act has no provision, or at least the system as it is right now has no provision. If there's an infringement, the copyright owner, it's not like that. The onus is upon the copyright owner to pursue a remedy, which is one of the things that the introduction of the CMO in the system exists to serve, because it understands sometimes pursuing a remedy for some sort of infringement, it can be costly. So one of the things being a part of or registering your work with ECMO is that it affords you that kind of a service. If there is an infringement, you've got an institution or an entity that will use its muscle or its resources because it has that capacity to do so.
And just to add, I think there's a potential conflict of interest if we are going to put the responsibility on Hulumende to fight for us, because what then happens in a situation where you are fighting against Hulumende? What if, for whatever reason, Hulumende is the person infringing on your copyright? So I say this just to support with what Mr. Nomalo is saying, is that at the end of the day, it's your property. When you think about it, IP is property, right? So in essence, it's like any other property. Hulumende will not fight for your land rights if there's an issue. They will not fight for the ownership of your car if there's an issue. Because you are the owner, the responsibility still lies with you. It is unfortunate though, because the reality is, njengoba usho, it is a capital intensive exercise, and it's something that Mr. Nxumalo highlighted ekuqaleni ukuthi konke lokhu lesikhuluma ngakho, it is a capital intensive exercise. Ideally, every creator must have a lawyer. Like, whether you can afford one or not, that is the reality, because you might not afford one now, but what happens when the property that you have all of a sudden is worth 10 million emalangeni? You see, it's also just a case of risk management. But yeah, that's what I wanted to say, Mr. Nhleko. Ngiyasiva lesikhalo sakho. Khala ngisi, as artists, we don't have the capacity right now. But the reality is we need to find ways, we need to come together, and maybe just as a suggestion, we need to come together as artists and maybe lobby, or rather convince certain legal practitioners to say, hey, can you form an association for us where you will deal with our issues pro bono? But maybe that's something we need to look at instead of saying, will Hulumende do this for us?
Yeah, sorry, can I just add something there? What Mmeli is saying, you see, if you're going to approach a lawyer with something, the lawyer, one of the first questions is going to ask you is, did you understand what you were getting yourself into? A lot of exploitation in music and in arts, for it to get to that point, Nyalo, where you need to go to court to fight over something. Usually you get into that situation because you didn't understand what you were getting yourself into. It's like any other business. If you're going to sell product, you need to know what you're getting into. If you're going to poison people with your product, you're going to be in trouble because you didn't fully understand what you were getting into. And that is why my artists have gotten into the predicament that they're in currently, is because the other guy on the other side knows that chances are when you just want to create, you're not going to invest the time into understanding your business. And he's going to come with that magic wand. That's why everybody, you know that signing on fee. Signing on is basically telling you that your product is worth a lot and I'm going to exploit you if you don't understand. If you accept this thing, you are signing away rights that you don't understand. Because then they come and collect later with funny terms, more recoupment, what. They have various ways of knocking down your share because you didn't know. So at the very beginning, understand what you're getting into to avoid lama situations now, because artists that didn't understand now are stuck with contracts, and a contract in a court of law is binding. You can't go and cry and plead ignorance, because ignorance is not a defense in a court of law. Trust me. You can't go there and tell the judge, I didn't know. Judge is going to tell you, why did you sign if you didn't know? Why didn't you get the information? Why didn't you get to exhaust every single option you have to understand it before you put your name on that paper? Because they cannot reverse it. Trust. No good lawyer on earth can reverse what that contract says if you had signed it.
All right, I think we had another question here. Is there anyone else who has a question to follow up from there? Okay, there's two. I hope we're making note of them. Okay, sure.
Morning, everyone. My name is Mozi Fagute. I work for the production department at Destiny Group, and I have two questions. The first is, how does the distribution of copyright work? Let's say I make a song with an artist, I feature an artist, but I paid for the beats and I paid for the studio session. But now when it's time to register, I'm sure you have to register all the creators. So how does the fair distribution of those rights work in a case where one party put in more capital, if I may put it that way? And the second is, what is the sign-up procedure involved when joining the IP office, and how would an independent artist who doesn't have any management or distribution channels, like what's the best way for them to approach that if they don't have someone who can explain all the fine print?
Okay, I think I can take the first one and then Dr. Lili, Mr. Ngumalo will take. So the first one, let's go back to the explanation that was given. Music or a song, separated into two. There's the composition, and then there's the sound recording. The composition, again, you divide it into two. There's the musical composition, there's the literary composition. So within, as a 7 percentage, 50% ngala, kuna 25. But of course, all things are subject to negotiation between the parties. But I'm just going to use an even split for the purpose of the illustration. So half of that composition goes to those who created the musical work, the authors, the beat makers, the melody makers. The other half goes to the people who wrote the lyrics, the literary aspect of it. The 50% longala is the sound recording or the master. In plain terms, the master belongs to those who invested in it. Can invest monetarily as a label. I pay for studio, you go and you record. I pay for the mixing engineer, I pay for everything. But nowadays, most artists will tell you, hey, I have a studio at my own place. So you are making an investment into the sound recording. Okay, as a label, I'll pay for marketing, I'll pay for that. Again, all of that is subject to negotiation between the parties to say, I feel like I'm investing 70%. And then the artist can say, okay, I also think like I'm investing 30%. You own 30% of the master or the sound recording, the label owns 70% of the master on the sound recording. Ngalago composition, it is to my understanding, I stand to be corrected, but you cannot buy the ownership. Ngala. A person, lopale ingoma, owns the song. Buti wena upatalele studio, you cannot own the rights to the literary part of the that's why I go to publishing. That's now the publishing side. What can happen is that you can agree with the writer to say, hey, assign me your rights and let me go and exploit it for you. And once we make money, I will take 30% as an administration fee and I will give you 70%. But there is no label that should own the authorship or the composer rights unless they were actively involved in the writing or the production. Is your first question answered? Okay. For the second question about the registration.
Yeah, sorry, can you just recap? It was, if you're going to the IP office to, what is it, you want to...
The sign-up process. Is there a process in place currently to say, okay, I have songs, I want to register, so where do they start?
Yeah, okay. I think it's staisherisha leyo na dokotela ngala. All right. Ngala on the society part, that's that phase 2 I was talking about when I was setting up those systems. Registration is going to be one of the systems that we set up in terms of this is the procedure that you go through to register your work with us before we give you a certificate that says this is your work. Obviously, gunema principles let's see it. It is good to you submit your work. You have to prove originality, meaning you have to prove it's original, meaning it has to be put up to the public through an advertisement, if there are any objections now back on Labati, this work is theirs, there's some sort of dispute, there's a certain period, it's up in public for a certain period. If there are disputes that come through, those are then taken up to the tribunal to resolve true ownership. So Invayako can never be registered unless it has gone through a process like that. But that process on the society side has not yet been formulated. However, Njobang Shito earlier is even though the society is still developing, is still hiring and going to go into developing systems for doing these things, we author right now, you can register your copyright and get some certificate for it. And by doing that, you approach the IP office and Dr. Togotela what's that process on that end.
All right. The procedure at the IP office is, because this is a new act which has only been recently operationalized, we register all the other rights, but with copyright, we are in a process whereby we are developing, which are the details that we need. Remember, we said this is voluntary registration. It's not everyone who will want to register with us. You would have a variety of reasons of why you would want to register with the Copyright Office. So what we are in the process of doing is we are updating our system to be able to capture a registration of copyright, so that the process is automatic and all that. But we haven't. It takes a while, to settle as to what are the costs involved with that. It has to go through other people as to should copyright registration on our side have money, have monetary costs. We haven't made that decision. But what we are doing as an office is to say, if somebody at team owns something to register, we can do a manual registration, which we will then convert to the digital one. For the purposes of priority, establishing priority, that this is when you registered, and then we automate things later. We can't do that. It's something we are looking to start. It's not there yet, but if there is a pressing need, you can go to the Copyright Office. We can do that for you. Right. And the certificate that you get from us, the assumption is that you are the owner. The people who are listed as owners, we just take it at face value. If there are disputes, that's where it's the process through a copyright society, because that's where there is distribution of Mmeli. With us, we're just taking what you're saying to us.
I'm actually glad Dr. Lulu cleared that up, because I think we need to understand the difference between registering your copyright with the CMO and registering your copyright. With the CMO, it's for the collective management. Now, this is where you're thinking Bosamro, those type of things where they, licensing to radio stations, those type of things. That is that type of registration. But if you want some sort of proof just to say, Ingoma yami, then you can do this. It's just understanding what you want to do with this copyright. Do you want to take this product, this IP, and exploit it monetarily, so that is on this side by the CMO, or are you just registering it to protect yourself, to say, okay, on this date, August 25th, we made this song, this is the song, and you have some sort of registration or some sort of record, yes. And then with your splits, when you were talking about splits in the studio, this argument has happened for many years, that now we've gotten to a point where a lot of the societies that you are now going to register your works under will kind of give you a kind of split sheet to give you some sort of guidelines. You understand? Now it's just up to you to then be honest about contribution amongst yourselves when you're in the studio, to say that yes, he did most of the programming of the keys or whatever, he's entitled, or he's a composer really, or he just did a verse or whatever. That's now amongst yourselves. But usually when you are signing up or going to register with a specific society, they kind of will give you some sort of guidelines as to, you know.
All right. In the interest of time, I'll ask that we keep our questions brief and the responses as brief as possible as well. Can we please take the...
Asibonge lo sosihlalweni. Nami ngisacela kuphindze ngimuve ukuthi nangibude ngoba ngasinamajala amanye lamabili ngase sengiyawaniketa namabude sicela sitawushamba kanye. Wakami umbuto uke kwakhulunywa earlier ngenzaba yekokuthi nangabe sesakho umculo sengiyafika ka producer lapho lo producer sakhe khona so ngathi producer sodla umhlanganiso sekusiwa lo mculo sewakhe kanti la kangwane I think njengoba sathi ukuthi thina asikwathi nalokubhala letagila talomculo ngokuthi nangi lo music ngifike ngihame lengoma kunang mouse ngiso ndindi ibass hits gu adlaleke mbamba wami lo mculo so udla njani manje mouse bese sekuthiwa sewakhe ngesimanga sekuthi sirecorde la naye utshelwe ngimi ukuthi ibass ithini ligitari lithini jikiti mouse sekuthiwa se yini author noma yini umsunguli nani kanti phela utshelwe ngimi mouse nayo le nangi lokho ukuthi sowudla njani egameni producer kani utshelwe ngimi ulapho lo mbuto wami angihlome mouse.
Okay. Senenjani siwathathe onke lama question ya.
Angibonge baba Gininza noma so ungijambisise nje. Nami nginembuto amanekele ami ngathi imnengana but ngidawuzama kuyenda ibe fast. Lo icala has to do with monetization. I think the presentation ya Dr. Dludlu, I saw licensing, suing, outright payments, but I didn't see broadcast rights, good monetization. And because then I'll then ask you, when will artists start getting royalties or getting money for music played, especially on public enterprises, which is radio and TV, which I think is what gets the most audience. Because I know for private it's going to be easier because the law is going to handle that very, very easily. But for public, when will artists start getting more royalties for that? And then the second...
Let's keep it at 2, please.
Okay, maybe let me keep it at 1 and only ask that one.
Okay, please pass over to the next gentleman.
Thank you. There you go, sir.
Thank you. Sanibonani. Umbuto wami ukuwe babe Dludlu kusi. Ukhuluma ngenzaba ye fair trade. Besicela manje ujule kancane babe ukuthi nguphi lapho fair use, nguphi lapho labane malungelo ukusebenzisa mahala lo music. Bese babe Mnguni inzaba yema-CMO babe khona yini ama-systems now in place to ensure ukuthi music wefu u-collected useteni non-profit organization so ensure njani thina ukuthi lo msebenzi niyawenda mhlambe wena njengebuchopho nihlangana ka-8 ngeminyaka but una secretary wakho lothanza amapiano kanti mina ngendi-jazz and akawufaki kahle lo mfufo lengithi ngawo. So do you have systems in place to ensure that our music is collected properly, and why do you not take like a certain percentage from the royalties and all that? Because maybe if you took percentages, you'd put much higher effort to making sure our music is, we get the money that we need.
Okay, maybe I'll start with the first one. Yeah, El Solo J was asking, in a session, I am basically writing the melody, and then someone, my understanding, transcribes it into that format that it becomes. That one is a tricky one because we need to understand how much of intellectual capacity or intellectual property of their own did the producer put there? Because yes, you are humming the melody, but is it exactly as you hummed it? I think in most cases, majority of it is you. You are the author of it. You created it. But I do believe there are some related rights that belong to the producer as well, because there's a certain level of investment that they are putting in. My question to you would be, are you paying them for transcribing? No. For them to say Segwabo and exclude you, I'd like to believe that is wrong, but I do believe there's a certain amount of negotiation that needs to happen between the two parties, because the reality is, good le standard sexy, you get 10%. It's all down to negotiation, and that's why it's important to negotiate before you work. And I know it's an uncommon practice, and some says it stifles creativity, but the reality is you need to negotiate before you go into the actual action. You must know, I'm contributing this much because I will be entitled to that much. And that makes things easier. And Dr. P mentioned a very important word that maybe we might not have time to dwell on it: split sheet. Every single musician here, producer, writer, composer, whatever you are, go and look at what a split sheet is, because in essence, a split sheet is like a title deed. What a title deed is to land, a split sheet is to intellectual property. It will dictate how much you own in that, and it will help both Dr. Lulu, Masendo register, because there needs to be that proof of ownership, which is the split sheet.
Yes, I just wanted to add, Gutsi, thank you for that question, Solocha, because it's, I don't think it's as tricky as Mmeli says. Obviously, it's tricky in the sense that it can escalate to Kansas, tribunal, so go Pigiswana. But fundamentally, I mean, authorship rests on the intellectual effort. Who invested intellectual effort? Guyaka land. And in a situation, if you're just a transcriber, meaning when you're just transcribing, you cannot claim you're not really the author of the thing. But chances are, into evaluating original and who the intellectual effort came from, who's the person, why construct, it will always, the authorship will always land on the side of lomvuloyo. Lolumnye's job as a compensation for transcribing, but you can't say you're the owner when you have not applied that intellectual effort to imagine it, to construct it. The transcriber is the person who fixes it into material form, but fixing something into material form for somebody apply does not make you an author on that particular one.
And the second question was around the broadcast rights.
Yes, when do you start? That's always the question I get, which is, I suppose, is the most important question. I cannot give you here's the date. What I can give you is the plan of action that's going to be rolled out that leads to that happening. The plan of action in 3 phases, and the 3 phases is really year 1, year 2, and year 3. Year 1, I mean, we started in terms of Umnyaga, we started in April. The first year, these decisions are also being based on, as an entity, you annually you have a certain budget to work with. You have to decide, with this budget, this is what I can achieve with this budget. This is what I'm going to focus on Lomnyak. The first year, as a society, the focus is hiring the secretariat. That is the team, the executive team that's going to run the secretariats. As a board, we don't wake up every day and do the business of royalty management and collection. One oversight element. So there's an actual executive that's going to have a director, and then guna 3 main departments. There's the registration department, there is the licensing department, and then there is the royalty management department, which is the monitoring department and computation and distribution department. Our job, year 1, is to hire. We're going to hire those 4 main people to form the secretariat or to become the executive, that is operations arm of the society. That's 1. And then 2, Glomnyaga Lona is going to be investing in the training of that particular staff. There's going to be benchmarking processes, meaning ukuthi they travel by emaveni bayobuka lamanye ma CMO ukuthi asebenza njani bamunya lwati lapho. Experts are brought in to talk about how to run a CMO, how to manage a CMO, how to start a CMO. So there's going to be there's a training component for that staff to capacitate them, capacity building basically, in terms of being able to effectively run the Eswatini Copyright Society. And then 3, Glomnyaga Law, this financial year, by the way, ends for us, it ends in March 2023. The third aspect is to spend on awareness campaigns for what we call entry phase users and authors, which is this thing, Dr. Dludlu mentioned it, Dr. Piu. Yes, the broadcasting sector is going to be the first place, just in terms of setting up those systems so that there is royalty payments. But before we can begin to say Nabo, they need to be sensitized. As a broadcaster, how do I set up my systems to track the music? Because right now, if you were to go into my broadcasters A2 right now, you're not going to find those systems in place, tracking the play Yawolo music, whether it's both TV or film. So there's also a sensitization and a capacity building that needs to happen on that end. Kukulmisa, it's okay, this is how you have to prepare yourself as a broadcaster. Same thing that prepare lama authors. That's year 1. Year 2, the team, let's say, that has been capacitated, has to put in place systems. There has to be a system in place, Goguti. This is how you register. You follow these procedures. These are the templates. This is the form you fill out. This is how you fill it out. This is the process. This is how long it takes to get your registration certificate. We have to set up a registration system. The secretariat, they also have to set up a licensing system. Goguti, how do you determine a rate? What's the formula that is being used? And then they have to put that formula in place. They have to put in place monitoring, tracking systems, and then they have to put in place distribution formulas, which is I don't know, my piano or whatever. Those distribution formulas go good. See how is the royalty going to be calculated, regardless go good much bigger than lomunye one genre, lenye genre. There are formulas that are going to be put in place to try to ensure some sort of fair distribution. It doesn't mean an equal distribution of the royalty, but fair distribution of EMA members, a society. So the second year, most likely, Mnagetu will involve setting up those systems, testing those systems, and preparing the people, the users, and the authors that are going to be using those systems, which understand those systems and test kusebenda kwao. The likelihood, I'm not saying this is a date, but just looking at the program of action, the likelihood is Goguti beginning to extract royalty is going to happen after those systems have been put in place, which is either at the end of that second year or at the beginning of the third. So ilapho nje. I can't give you an exact it's nalelanga, because one thing that I'm also learning kule position lenguyo is with all the best laid plans, they always need a lot of effort, pushing them, making them move forward, making them happen. So there could be more contingencies, certain things are taking a little bit longer than others. Those are things we're going to have to mitigate, but that's the plan that is being implemented, that's the plan that's being followed. That is sort of like the targets that we are pursuing in that regard.
All right, thanks, Mkwen. Just to add to that, CIP office, Lakshogo, that's that, Dennis. CIP office, we not only just look at what they are doing, we also, I think, we are opening IP. Like I said, it's your right, Umuntu. The fact that we are setting up a CMO, royalties, it doesn't negate lokuthi as an author, you have copyright. The law is there now. If you you can still go out there and negotiate with the users of your content before you figure operationalize. I think that's an important aspect here.
And I think the second part of your question by Pendvulile, to answer your first part, it is to my understanding, according to WIPO, the CMO must be non-profit. It can't be any other way. So akusinga kutsanza kwabo ukuthi they are non-profit. I think those are the international standards.
I think what my brother was alluding to is, is there some sort of financial gain they get? Yes, there is. Because as a non-profit, it doesn't mean your people are not getting paid. Do you understand? That percentage, that whatever your CMO, Bosamro, whoever are taking, that 20-30% of what your royalties come in, that goes towards administration. So that is now paying people to actively do it. Compliance officers, people to be there at Samro, to do the registration, all of that type of stuff. Those people are paid from the percentage that they extract from whatever's collected amongst the members. Yes, they do. Everybody takes a percentage. It's how they're going to operate. Because if you're non-profit, how are you going to keep the lights on? You understand? So there is that component. And from my understanding is that those people are, since they are not really profit-making, they're just going to be paid, there's an element of neutrality. Do you get what I'm saying? Because they have to be neutral when it comes to everybody that's a member. You can't just go and say, okay, e-gospel is making the most money, so we're going to be focused with the gospel artists and the rest are going to be neglected. No, the way the setup is, it wouldn't be admitted to the international federations and other big bodies that then you have to trade with and deal with to exchange monies that are earned in both South Africa and whatever. You wouldn't exist if you were running a shady operation. You wouldn't be admitted in.
Yeah. Thank you very much. With that said, I'll ask you Repisha up Lapo. Thank you very much to the panel. I'd like to extend my apologies from Velemseni. She wasn't feeling too well, so we thought it's better to excuse her from the panel so at least she can work on getting better. But they are still here, I think, for more discussions. You can still engage with them, get whatever contexts are required. And as Dr. P said, it is a very intensive process in terms of the information you need to get. But you have the internet. Use it, get the information, put yourself in a better position because no one will do that for you. But from us, sitawuzama kuchubeka sibe na more sessions that will look at like particular aspects because this was a very broad conversation and there are many, finer details that we didn't go through. So we will try to organize workshops that will look into all of those things. For me, especially the split sheets, because what I've seen in the local industry, see our Kalela Lama royalty, there will come a time where they need to give us, and we will have hundreds of disputes at the tribunal, because I know for a fact there are not many agreements in place. So with that said, thank you very much. We'll have a short break and maybe commence at 1. Yeah.